but one can draw a pretty clear and direct line from the level of Islamic immigration that a Western country brings in and the level of anti-Semitism. That should not be a particularly controversial statement to say that. It simply just is the case. In fact, in recent years, I've done a couple of speeches in Budapest, Hungary, and Hungary is actually one of the only countries on the European continent that has been adamant against bringing in large swaths of Muslim migrants. And I spent a lot of time, my first trip to Budapest 3.5 years ago, I went to numerous synagogues, kosher restaurants, Jewish community centers there. So I spent a good amount of time in the Jewish part of Budapest. Not only does it feel totally safe, there's actually barely any security guards because it's just not much of it's not really an active concern there. So there's a very clear and direct line, I think, between the number of Islamic migrants and the level of anti-Semitism. But it's not just the Muslims, unfortunately. Here, in my book, I argue that much of it is the rise of what we refer to as contemporary wokeism, of leftist liberalism, cultural Marxism, whatever you want to refer to it there, and basically just this overarching mentality that has become one of the prevailing orthodoxies now in American higher education and American left-wing elite circles in general, which is this notion that we can, in kind of classic Marxist fashion, we can cleanly divide society into a dichotomy, but instead of the old Marxist economic dichotomy of the patricians and the plebeians or the proletariat, rather the woke say that you can divide society into the oppressors and the oppressed. And Christians certainly are oppressors in this ridiculous, oversimplified dichotomy. Somehow the Jews end up being oppressors too, which frankly is news to me. I'm not sure how anyone can read the history of mankind and conclude that the Jews are anything other than the most oppressed people ever. But this is not, this is not me. This comes from the left-wing wokerati, shall we say there. And this combination of bringing Muslim immigration combined with the metastasis and the ubiquity in many places of this left-wing woke ideology really has created a very toxic environment, I think, for Jewish people. But Christians are really not far behind. And this is another point in my book, John, Israel and Civilization, which is to argue repeatedly throughout this book that anti-Semitism here, there, and everywhere, going back for thousands of years, it's never about the Jews. It is virtually never, ever, ever about the Jews. It is symptomatic of something more broadly going wrong in society there. And what starts with the Jews, also we know, never, never ends with the Jews. I mentioned Karl Marx. Marx is actually a perfect example to illustrate this point. Marx himself was the grandson of an Orthodox rabbi. He himself was Jewish under Jewish law, but he harbored a seething hatred, a visceral resentment of the Jewish people. He had this infamous anti-Semitic essay in the 1840s on the Jewish question, which is really quite ugly. But we also know that Marx's ultimate goal was not the eradication of the Jewish people. His ultimate goal was the eradication of capitalism, of Christendom, of that which free enterprise and Christianity have built all throughout the West there. So he really understood what anti-Semites have understood going back thousands of years, that in order to actually get to the real peoples who built Western civilization, that's the Christians. That's Christendom there. Christianity is what actually built Western civilization. But in order to get to Christianity, it necessarily makes sense that you start with the original people of the book. It's really diabolical, but frankly, it also makes some degree of sense. So I suppose give diabolical credit where diabolical credit is due.